Hey, Chapter 1, The Problem with Medical Education. In this chapter, I will share my personal path to medical school, from playing football in college and undergoing multiple hip surgeries to becoming a freelance artist and eventually applying to medical school. This chapter highlights the many twists and turns I took before reaching my goal. I also discuss the challenges I faced while applying to medical school, including multiple rejections and how I finally found success. In this chapter, you could expect an honest account of my non-traditional journey into medicine, as well as hurdles I faced and the persistence that was required for me to overcome them. Also, insights into how those experiences shaped my approach to step one preparation. And so, in general, medical school is an intense experience that demands an enormous amount of information be learned in a short period of time. But what many of us don't realize until we're in the deep process that is what we're taught in medical school doesn't always prepare us for the reality of standardized board exams like Step 1. In my first 2 years of medical school, I struggled, mainly to grasp the concepts being thrown at me. Not because I wasn't interested in the material, but because the educational resources didn't align with how we were used to being tested and how I was taught. For the most part, medical school is a blur of PowerPoints, lectures, dense textbooks, and we sit in class, we take notes, and we try to absorb as much information as possible. But when it comes to time to actually do an exam, especially something like STEP or retired board exam questions like the CBSE or CAS, we're faced with a different challenge altogether. Step 1 doesn't just test your knowledge, it tests your ability to apply that knowledge in a highly specific, time pressurized way. This disconnect between learning the material and being able to use it on exams is one of the biggest hurdles that medical students often face, and I am definitely one of those. So, reasons why I struggled. Like many of you, I was deeply invested in learning about the human body and medicine, and I wanted to understand the mechanisms of disease, the intricacies of pharmacology, and the physiology behind each system. But when I sat down to study for Step 1, I quickly realized that the knowledge I had built wasn't enough. It had become much of a task to just become a better test taker, not just a better student of medicine. This realization was really frustrating. I felt like I spent most of my time just learning how to pass a test than to become actually a better doctor. The resources provided to me by my medical school were helpful in the classroom, but there was a disconnect from the format of Step 1. I was handed PowerPoint presentations and lecture notes that were structured in a way that didn't overlap with what I would see in a multiple choice question. And the concepts, that I was being taught were relevant, but the way that they were presented didn't translate to me actually getting the questions right on my exam. Step 1 doesn't really care how well you can recite lectures or how much of first aid you've memorized. It tests your ability to recognize patterns, think critically under pressure, and apply knowledge to unfamiliar situations. The exam forces you to connect the dots between abstract principles and real-world applications, something that can't be achieved through rote memorization alone. You have to know how to apply it, and you also have to know how to study appropriately for it. It's all about the preparation. In medical school, we're often taught to focus on breadth. The board exam doesn't reward breadth. It rewards depth and precision. It tests your ability to pick out the most important details from a flood of information and make quick, accurate decisions. We have Roscoe here. He's jumping up for joy because he loves science. But the USMLE has other plans. And they're like, you got to get through me first. And obviously, that's not what Roscoe signed up for. And it's going to be a challenge, but Roscoe can do it, and so can you. During my dedicated Step 1 preparation, I found that much of what I had spent my first 2 years learning wasn't directly useful for the exam. Sure, it gave me a foundation, but when it came to answering the kinds of questions Step 1 presented, I felt lost. Like, it was crazy. The PowerPoints and the lecture notes I relied on were too broad and too superficial for the level of understanding required on the exam. I needed to relearn how to actually study. And often it feels like a crossroads between wanting to study and devote your time to passing step one and actually becoming a doctor. And there's some overlap, but there's some clear deviations between what you need for an actual board exam to become a doctor and what you actually need in the clinic to actually become a doctor. And you often have to reckon with that reality very quickly, or else you'll get lost and consumed. That's when I realized that the problem wasn't really me, it was the system. Medical education is designed to make us absorb information quickly, but it doesn't teach us how to apply this information in a high pressure situation for a test. The resources we're given don't necessarily align with the skills we need to pass step one. That's an issue. We're left to fend for ourselves, piecing together a study strategy from whatever third-party resources we can find, hoping that we'll eventually have enough to carry us over across the finish line. And that's very much a gamble. Kind of sucks. The real eye-opener for me came when I started to focus less on the content and more on the process of test taking. I had to shift my mindset. Step one wasn't about mastering medicine. It was about mastering the art of standardized testing. This was a hard pill to swallow because I went into medical school wanting to learn how to treat patients, not how to navigate multiple choice exams. But the truth is, if you want to pass step one, you have to prioritize becoming a better test taker over becoming a master of medical content. And so think about it this way. You have your didactic, which is the first 2 years of medical school, or if you are one of the unlucky ones, 18 months of medical school, which is just the classroom work, nothing clinical whatsoever. And you have your one pile. Some of that will teeter over into step one. That's step one pile that you have for your dedicated. Some people have 4 weeks to focus on step one and dedicated. Others, like my school, had 8 weeks. Or you may need more than that. But you have a separate pile for step one. And then you have another pile, which is a whole different beast, which is clinicals. We're not going to worry about that because you got to get through step one until you can actually approach the clinical stuff. At least that's how it was at my school. Apparently, you can start your clinicals without passing step one, and you have to pass it within a certain period, which is wild to me. I feel like it gives people very much an upper edge, right? So, yeah. But you still got to pass it, right? And you can't do anything until you pass step one. But it's 3 different piles, and that's one of the things that is very clear, and they make it very clear. So step one is a game, and to win, you need to know the rules. The exam doesn't test you on everything you've learned in medical school. It tests you on specific skills, pattern recognition, critical thinking, and the ability to apply broad concepts in a very focused way. You don't need to know everything, but you do need to know how to use what you know effectively. And it very much feels like you're walking a tightrope from one end to the other, and you're trying to balance a bike on your hand. And if your balance isn't good, you may get caught slipping. I found myself doing thousands of URL questions and Anki cards, not because I was trying to learn more medicine, but because I was trying to train myself to think the way step one required. I had to shift my focus from mastering content to mastering the test itself. This was frustrating because I felt like I was sacrificing my passion for learning medicine in favor of just getting through the exam. And because it was just a pass fail, you don't even know your score. You don't even get a real score. You just get a pass. I'm like, come on now, dude. So we have my buddy Roscoe here. And he's like, let's learn medicine. And he is stomping away and he is ready for action. But then, out of nowhere, USMLE just pops its ugly head and is like, not so fast, and becomes the bearer of bad news. Obviously, that sucks all the wind out of Roscoe, and he is not happy right now. And so then He just goes over to his desk and he puts his head on the table, and towering over him is just a whole bunch of tests that he has to get through in order to enjoy the thing that he signed up for. And that is very much what my experience was. You can do whatever you want as long as you pass those exams. You ain't passing those exams, you ain't doing nothing. And so another issue I encountered during my preparation was the quality of the resources available. Let's be honest. The production value of most medical education resources is pretty poor compared to the media that we consume on a daily basis. And me as an animator, somebody that has worked in animation and entertainment for the past 15 years, I was grossly underwhelmed. I was like, this is what we got? This is what? And y'all paying for what? How much for this? Grossly underwhelmed. You know, we're used to high quality YouTube videos, slick interfaces, and engaging visuals. But when it comes to medical education, many of those resources have what we call an outdated look. They're boring and they're pretty poorly designed. Hopefully I could do something to change that. For the most part, it's a whole bunch of videos of somebody that has a camera, they have a whiteboard, and they're doing what is a PowerPoint presentation or a board presentation. It's a presentation, right? Not flashy. You don't have explosions. Like, come on, bro. So I firmly believe that if medical education resources were created with the same level of attention to quality and user experience as the entertainment we consume, it would drastically improve the learning process. Students today are more visually inclined, and we crave resources that are interactive, engaging, and visually appealing. As a neuroscientist, that's what the basis of my research is, and there's so much data to support that, like, it works. We just don't know why there isn't more of it. As a creator, I know why there isn't more, but it's just a matter of bridging that gap. And at least for me, in my PhD research, I get the opportunity to at least explore that, which is really fun. You know, we're stuck with the dry textbooks and clunky online platforms that don't match our learning styles, and that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. But what do we do about that? Well, let's trim the fat. All right, so here's the deal. Let me break it down for you real quick and clean. Non-traditional path. Who cares? You don't have to follow some cookie cutter road just to get to where you're going. Football player, freelance artist, medical school, doesn't matter. Your path is your own. Make it your own. The big thing is persistence is key. Surgeries, rejections, failures. It's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up. The key takeaway, stick to it. Your persistence is what gets you across the finish line, not perfection. Step 1 isn't about medicine. It's about the game. Let's be real. Studying for step 1 isn't about mastering medicine. It's about mastering the test. The resources out there, most of them are a hot mess. They don't match up with the exam's priorities, and that's a problem. Your job isn't to drown in the books. It's to figure out how to study smarter, not harder. The resource gap is very real. There's a big disconnect between what these so-called STEP resources teach and what actually shows up on the exam. Recognize this early, and you'll save yourself tons of frustration. So in Chapter 2, I'll hit you with the raw details of my Step 1 attempt for the first time, what went wrong, how I turned it around, and the strategies that worked when the stakes were at the highest. So stay tuned. You're going to want to hear this. And remember, persistence isn't optional. It's the game plan. So let's keep moving. Thanks for checking this out. This is USMLE Step 1000, created by me, Stephen Christian, a space where you can turn your Step 1 prep into something smarter, sustainable, and stress-free. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. You can follow us on Spotify for more study tips and more audio podcast stuff, Instagram at USMLE Step 1000, and you can like the Facebook page to stay connected. Don't forget to download all the resources, all the Anki decks, the clinical clues, everything from the PDFs and everything that you saw in the videos you can find at www.step1000.com. And follow the blog for more updates as well at www.USMLE Step1000.com, your one-stop shop for everything Step 1000. And if you like what I'm doing here and you want to follow or at least support, you can check me out on social media at Stuck on an Island. Thanks again, and I look forward to sharing more stuff about Step 1 prep and how to overcome these mental hurdles so that you can have the best possible experience possible. So again, I'm not going to hold you any longer, but remember, let's keep pushing forward one step at a time to 1000.